What if the person who once tormented you could be the key to your redemption? A tech billionaire, a bullied girl from high school, and a night where masks aren't just for disguise. One night could change everything. But what happens when the past comes face to face with the present? Stay tuned to find out the shocking twist that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. In the heart of Silicon Valley, Ryan Bennett sat behind his desk, staring at the sleek computer screen of his high-rise office. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he contemplated his next move, his next big project. The life of a tech billionaire was fast-paced, full of meetings and deadlines, but today, there was something nagging at the back of his mind. A message on his phone blinked at him. An old acquaintance was trying to reach out. It was from Ben Harris, a former classmate, one he hadn't spoken to in years. The message was short but compelling. "Hey Ryan, the alumni ball is coming up. You should reach out to Ellie Carter. You owe it to her, man. She's come a long way." Ryan stared at the text, a knot forming in his stomach. Ellie Carter, he hadn't thought about her in over a decade. In high school, she had been the girl everyone made fun of, the one with thick glasses and braces who kept to herself. Then Ryan had been one of the popular kids. He didn't join in on the mocking, but he didn't step in to stop it either. Now, all these years later, he found himself facing the consequences of those silent moments. The invitation to the alumni ball was meant to be a celebration, a reunion of sorts for those who had survived the tumult of high school. But for Ryan, it felt like more than just a casual event. It felt like an opportunity to atone for something long buried. He had made his fortune, built a name for himself, but some parts of his past still gnawed at him. He had heard about Ellie since high school, rumors that she had become a successful pediatric surgeon specializing in facial reconstruction. She had turned her painful high school years into something that helped others, a beacon of hope for kids who suffered from the same kind of trauma Ellie had endured. And yet, when Ryan thought of her, he didn't just think of her success. He thought of the silent guilt that had haunted him for years. Maybe this is a chance to do the right thing, he muttered to himself. The decision wasn't an easy one, but it was the right one. After some hesitation, Ryan composed the email. He could have kept it formal, professional even, but he knew better than that. He owed her honesty, something that his younger self had never offered. "Ellie, you probably don't remember me from high school, but I was one of the ones who just stood by while others treated you terribly. I wasn't cruel, but I didn't stop it either. I'm reaching out because the alumni ball is coming up, and I'd like to invite you to join me. I know it's been a long time, and I can't undo the past, but I wanted to extend the invitation. No pity, no guilt. Just a chance to catch up. If you're not interested, I completely understand. Best, Ryan Bennett." He stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. It was an awkward email, an uncomfortable invitation, but it was the truth. He hit send, and just like that, the ball was in Ellie's court. Ellie Carter had never expected to hear from anyone from her high school years again. In fact, she had tried to forget about those years entirely. The memories of being picked on, for her awkward appearance, the thick glasses, the braces, the way she hid in the corners of the cafeteria, had long faded into a distant part of her past. But they were never truly gone. They had just been buried deep inside, as she built a life for herself that no one could take away. Now, as a respected pediatric surgeon specializing in reconstructive surgery for children, Ellie had earned respect in the professional world. Her work had transformed countless young lives, restoring both their physical appearance and their confidence. She was no longer the shy, invisible girl from high school. She had found her voice, her purpose. Yet, the ghosts of her past remained. When she opened her email and saw Ryan's name, her heart skipped a beat. Ryan Bennett, the tech mogul. The former jock who had never been outright cruel but had certainly never stood up for her either. For a moment, Ellie just stared at the screen. Memories flooded her, the hallway whispers, the cruel jokes, the way she had been laughed at in front of the whole school. But there was something different about his message. It wasn't just an apology. It felt like an invitation to something more. A chance to face the past, perhaps. A chance for Ryan to show that he wasn't the same person he had been in high school. And maybe, just maybe, a chance for Ellie to show that she was no longer the scared, invisible girl she once was. She read the email again, her fingers trembling as she hovered over the reply button. Finally, with a deep breath, she typed her response. "Ryan, I never expected to hear from you again. High school wasn't exactly my favorite time, as you can imagine, but I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'll attend the ball, but on one condition, I'll wear a mask. No one will know it's me unless I choose to reveal myself. I'll see you there, Ellie." She hit send, feeling both liberated and apprehensive. There was no going back now. She had made the decision, and now it was up to her to face the past, on her terms. Ryan sat back in his chair when he received Ellie's response. He had expected rejection, or at best indifference. Instead, she had agreed, but with conditions. A mask. Ryan couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her. She wasn't just asking for anonymity. She was asking for control, a way to shield herself from the judgment and scrutiny that she had endured for so long. He couldn't blame her. In fact, he respected her more for it. And so, he agreed to her terms. The mask was just the beginning. He was ready to make things right in whatever way he could. The days leading up to the alumni ball passed in a blur. Ryan found himself constantly thinking about Ellie's reply, trying to figure out how to prepare for the unexpected reunion. He was accustomed to making big decisions, to navigating the fast-paced world of business, but this was something entirely different. This was about real life, real emotions, and facing the ghosts of the past. And for the first time in a long time, Ryan was unsure of himself. As the ball drew nearer, Ryan became increasingly nervous. It wasn't just the idea of seeing Ellie again, but the realization that he hadn't truly understood the depth of her pain until now. Back in high school, he had simply let things happen, letting others tease her, letting her suffer in silence while he stood by, comfortable in his own bubble. Now he understood that this was more than just a simple apology. It was an opportunity to truly make amends. On the night before the alumni ball, Ryan decided to do something he hadn't done in years. Take a walk. The streets of San Francisco buzzed with life, but Ryan felt a strange sense of isolation. He was alone with his thoughts, surrounded by the hum of the city, and yet the past loomed over him like a shadow. He passed by shops, cafes, and street corners, each one triggering a memory or a feeling he hadn't realized was still there. Meanwhile, Ellie was also preparing for the event. Though she wasn't exactly excited, the whole idea of going to the ball felt foreign to her, like stepping into a world she didn't quite belong to. She had spent years carving out a life for herself, a life where her worth wasn't tied to her appearance or the cruelty of her classmates. As a surgeon, she had earned respect, both professionally and personally. But even now, the memories of high school haunted her. When she looked in the mirror, she still saw the girl she used to be, the one who had been laughed at for the simplest things, the one who was always left out. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She had changed, evolved into someone strong, confident, and capable. She had made peace with her past, but it was hard to fully let go of it. The alumni ball and Ryan's invitation represented a challenge, one that she had agreed to face head-on. She wasn't sure what would happen, but she knew she was going to do it for herself, not for him. Ellie spent hours choosing her outfit, carefully picking a dress that was elegant yet simple. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about feeling comfortable in her own skin. The dress she chose was a deep midnight blue, soft fabric that clung to her body just enough to feel like it belonged. The mask she had selected was intricate, a beautiful piece of silver filigree that would conceal her face, leaving just enough of her identity hidden. It was a symbol of her past and also a way for her to feel in control. The night of the ball finally arrived, and Ellie stood before her mirror one last time. The mask, delicate and shimmering in the light, was the final piece. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a costume. It was her armor, the shield that would protect her from the past, from the people who had once made her feel small. As she put on the mask, she could almost feel the shift within herself. This was Ellie 2.0, the woman who had conquered her fears, who had built an entire career dedicated to helping children who had faced the same bullying she had. But tonight, she wasn't just a surgeon. She was someone who had finally decided to be seen on her own terms. Ryan had already arrived at the venue, standing near the entrance, a glass of wine in hand, waiting for the moment that would change everything. As he glanced around, he saw familiar faces, old friends and acquaintances. There were the same people from high school, all older now, but still carrying the same air of superiority. The popular crowd hadn't changed much. Ryan stood apart from them, uncomfortable in his expensive suit, feeling more like an outsider than he ever had. His mind wandered back to Ellie. How would she look? How had she changed? The girl he had known had been shy, almost invisible. Would she even recognize him? He doubted it. He had been just another face in the crowd back then. But now, as a successful CEO, he was expected to be someone important, someone worth noticing. The thought of Ellie in that dress, her face hidden behind the mask, gave him a strange sense of anticipation. He couldn't explain it, but he was eager to see her, to see who she had become. For years he had let her fade into the background, not once thinking about how much she had suffered or how she had found a way to rise above it all. When the doors opened, Ryan's eyes scanned the room, searching for the woman who had once been his classmate. And then he saw her. Ellie Carter, standing at the entrance with a grace that made her impossible to ignore. The mask she wore only heightened her mystery, adding an air of elegance to her presence. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. She was nothing like the girl he remembered. As she entered the ballroom, there was a sudden hush in the room. People turned their heads, whispering among themselves. The curiosity was palpable. Who was she? Why was she wearing a mask? Ellie walked confidently into the room, her movements calm and deliberate. She wasn't looking for approval or validation. She was there for herself. Her gaze met Ryan's, and for a brief moment, everything else seemed to fade away. Ryan approached her slowly, a mixture of awe and nervousness in his steps. He had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of seeing Ellie in front of him. Poised, powerful, and unmistakably beautiful. "You look amazing," Ryan said, his voice soft but sincere. Ellie smiled behind her mask, the expression barely visible but full of meaning. "Thank you, Ryan," she replied, her voice steady but with an edge of something deeper. "I wasn't sure about this, but I'm here now." He nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. This was the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. As the night continued, Ryan and Ellie spent more time together, talking, laughing, and connecting in a way that felt natural and unforced. It was as though the mask didn't just hide her face, it gave her a freedom she had never known in high school. The mask was no longer just a shield from judgment. It was a symbol of her strength, her growth, and the journey she had taken to get to this point. At one point during the evening, Ryan leaned closer to Ellie, his voice low. "You don't have to wear that mask, you know. You don't have to hide." Ellie looked at him, her gaze intense, her voice quiet but certain. "I'm not hiding, Ryan. I'm choosing to reveal myself when I'm ready. And tonight, this is how I want to be seen." Ryan's heart swelled with admiration for her. He had spent years hiding behind his wealth and success, but Ellie had found her power in vulnerability. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She had already proven everything to herself. The evening wore on, and as midnight approached, Ellie's mask still remained in place. But for the first time she felt no fear, no shame. She was in control, and for the first time she felt like she truly belonged. The past no longer held power over her. She had reclaimed herself. And in that moment, as she looked around the room, she realized something else. The people who had once hurt her no longer mattered. She had found her own worth. As the alumni ball began to wind down, the initial excitement had settled into a quieter, more reflective atmosphere. The chandeliers overhead cast a soft glow over the guests, and the hum of conversation filled the room. Ellie found herself standing at the edge of the dance floor, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. The mask she wore still shielded her face, but for the first time in a long time, it felt less like protection and more like a choice. Ryan, now standing beside her, was an unexpected comfort. They had spent most of the evening talking, catching up on what had happened in their lives since high school. Ryan was no longer the arrogant, aloof teenager he had been. Instead, he was a man who had faced his past and was trying to make amends. His sincerity was something Ellie hadn't expected, and though she wasn't entirely sure what this newfound connection meant, she couldn't deny that it felt real. "So this is how it feels to be the center of attention," Ellie said softly, her eyes flicking to the group of alumni laughing and chatting. "It's not as bad as I imagined." Ryan smiled, leaning in closer, speaking quietly so only she could hear. "I imagine it must be surreal. To have everyone notice you for who you are now, not who you were back then." Ellie nodded, her thoughts drifting to her high school years. It was strange, this sense of being noticed. Back then it had felt like the worst thing in the world, being the target of jokes, the person everyone whispered about behind their backs. But tonight, it was different. Tonight, she wasn't the girl who kept her head down. She was the woman who had worked tirelessly to rebuild herself, who had found strength in the very things she had once been ashamed of. "I've spent so much time thinking about my past," Ellie confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "About the way people saw me. and how I let it shape who I thought I was. But now I realize that what I've become has nothing to do with them. Ryan watched her closely, sensing the weight of her words. Ellie, you've become someone incredible. Your work, your journey, it's all been about overcoming, and you've done it. But there's still one thing you haven't done. Ellie raised an eyebrow. And what's that? You haven't really forgiven yourself, Ryan said, his voice gentle but firm. You've forgiven others. You've forgiven me in a way. But you haven't let go of the idea that you were somehow less than, or that your worth was determined by what happened in high school. Ellie's chest tightened as she processed his words. She hadn't realized it before, but Ryan was right. She had moved on, yes. She had built an incredible career and had helped countless children find healing. But deep down, she still carried the burden of those high school years. The judgment, the hurt. It had all been buried beneath the surface, but it was still there, pulling at her, defining the way she saw herself. I don't know if I can ever fully forgive myself for what happened, Ellie admitted, her voice shaking slightly. I've tried, but there's always this little voice telling me I'm not good enough, that no matter what I do, it's never enough. Ryan reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. Ellie, you don't need to carry that anymore. You've already proven yourself, not just to everyone else, but to yourself. You are enough. You've always been enough. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she saw not the boy who had stood by while others mocked her, but a man who truly understood her struggles. She saw the person who was trying to make up for the mistakes of the past, not just for her, but for himself as well. It was a strange kind of reconciliation, and though it wasn't perfect, it was real. As they stood there in the dimming light, the music around them softened, and Ellie allowed herself to finally exhale, letting go of the fear that had gripped her for so long. The mask she wore, though still physically present, was no longer necessary. It had served its purpose, but now she was ready to face the world. Not as the girl from high school, but as the woman she had become. The evening was winding down when Tom Martinez, a familiar name from their past, approached Ryan and Ellie. Tom had been part of the popular crowd in high school, and like Ryan, had never been overtly cruel to Ellie, but had certainly never done anything to stop the bullying either. In fact, Tom had been the mastermind behind some of the most hurtful pranks, including the ugly duckling chant that had followed Ellie around for months. Ryan noticed Tom's approach and instinctively tensed, but Ellie remained calm. She had already forgiven herself. There was no need to let anyone, not even Tom, make her feel small again. Ellie, Tom said, his voice laced with a hint of nervousness. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. Ellie looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. She hadn't expected this. In fact, she hadn't expected anything from him. She had imagined this moment many times over the years, but she had always envisioned it differently. Anger, hurt, a desire for revenge. But now, standing here in front of the man who had once tormented her, she felt nothing but a quiet sense of peace. You're sorry, Ellie repeated softly. I appreciate that, Tom, but I'm not here to relive the past. We were kids, and I was just as much a part of it as you. We all were. But I'm done with holding on to it. I've moved on. Tom nodded, his face reflecting a mixture of guilt and relief. I've been donating to your department for the last few years. Anonymously. I didn't want you to know. I wanted to help in any way I could. I thought it was the only thing I could do to make up for what we did. Ellie blinked in surprise. She hadn't known. She had no idea that Tom had been involved in supporting her work, even from a distance. It was a gesture she hadn't expected, but it meant something deeper than just the money or the charity. Thank you, Tom, Ellie said, her voice steady but warm. It means more than you know, but I'm not holding on to the past anymore. You don't have to redeem yourself through me. You've already started that process by acknowledging what happened. Ryan stood beside her, a quiet smile on his face. The moment felt surreal. After all the years of pain and resentment, here they were. Ellie, the woman who had conquered her demons. Tom trying to make amends in his own way. And Ryan still standing beside her, offering his support without asking for anything in return. Tom walked away. Ryan turned to Ellie, his eyes softening. You're stronger than I ever realized, he said, his voice full of admiration. You've done the work, not just as a doctor, but as a person. And I'm proud of you. Ellie smiled, finally feeling like she had shed the weight of her past for good. Thanks, Ryan. I'm proud of me too. And for the first time in years, Ellie felt truly free. Free to be seen, free to be herself, and free to leave the past behind. The evening came to a close, but for Ellie and Ryan, this night marked the beginning of something new, not just for their connection, but for their futures. For Ellie, it was a step toward healing from old wounds. For Ryan, it was a chance to rebuild his relationship with the woman he had once wronged, and in the process, rediscover a part of himself he had long buried. As the night faded, Ellie walked out of the ballroom, her head held high. She had arrived, as the girl who once felt invisible, but she left as the woman who had learned to stand tall and unapologetic. The night stretched on, but for Ellie and Ryan, the sense of anticipation in the air had shifted. There was no longer the heaviness that had once weighed down Ellie's shoulders, the weight of her past, the burden of being the ugly girl that everyone pitied or ignored. Now as she stood among the alumni, the mask she wore felt almost like a relic from a time she had long outgrown. It was no longer an emotional shield, but simply an accessory, a piece of armor that had allowed her to step into the arena once more, with control over her own identity. Ryan, on the other hand, was watching her with a newfound respect. As the evening had progressed, he had seen the transformation in Ellie firsthand, not just from the awkward girl he remembered, but from the woman standing confidently in front of him. There was an elegance to her, a grace that was impossible to ignore. Ryan had always been captivated by her intelligence and strength, but seeing her so unapologetically herself was something he hadn't expected. This was the real Ellie, the one who had been forged in fire, the one who didn't need anyone's approval to be proud of who she was. As they moved through the ballroom, Ellie felt the subtle shift in how people viewed her. There were still a few whispers, a few raised eyebrows, but they were no longer aimed at her in judgment. The whispers were those of curiosity and admiration. Her presence wasn't an anomaly or a punchline anymore. It was a statement. And for once, Ellie felt no shame. Ryan noticed the way Ellie held herself, poised and unbothered, even when a few of the old classmates who had once made her life miserable approached her. They were surprised to see her there, and even more so when they noticed how different she looked, how much more assured, how much more confident. There was no longer any trace of the awkward, self-conscious girl they had once known. A few classmates even made small talk, attempting to reconnect or apologize for the past, but Ellie's calm, measured responses made it clear she was no longer interested in revisiting old wounds. She was here to celebrate the person she had become, not to relive the cruelty she had endured. And Ryan, standing by her side, was proud of how far she had come. The night was nearing its end when Ellie realized something. The mask she had been wearing, while initially comforting, was now a barrier to fully embracing who she was. She had proven something to herself by wearing it, but now it was time to take it off. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. "Ryan," Ellie said quietly, catching his eye. "I think it's time." Ryan raised an eyebrow, confused, for a moment, but then he saw her fingers gently trace the edges of the mask. She wasn't just talking about the physical mask she wore, but about something deeper, something she had been hiding for far longer than just tonight. "You sure?" Ryan asked softly, his voice filled with a mix of curiosity and concern. Ellie nodded, her smile calm yet determined. "I've spent so many years hiding behind this mask, Ryan, but tonight it's no longer about who I was. It's about who I've become, and I don't need it anymore." With that, Ellie reached up and slowly began to remove the mask. The room seemed to hold its breath as the silver filigree came away, revealing her face, her real face, her braces, her glasses, and the years of quiet battles she had fought to become who she was. As the mask fell away, Ellie's vulnerability didn't seem like a weakness. It seemed like the most powerful thing she had ever done. She had chosen to be seen, to let the world see her on her own terms. The moment was quiet, suspended in time. The crowd around them continued to chat, but a few people glanced over, their eyes widening as they realized who she was. The shock on some faces was palpable, but it didn't faze Ellie. She wasn't doing this for their approval, and it was clear in the way she stood tall, her head high. Ryan smiled, genuinely moved by her strength. "You're incredible, Ellie," he said, his voice filled with awe. "I don't think I ever truly understood how strong you were. But I see it now. You've always been more than what anyone ever saw." Ellie met his gaze, her expression calm, but full of depth. "I was always more than they thought I was, Ryan. But I didn't know it then. I had to grow into it." As the evening continued, Ellie felt lighter. There was no longer a need to hide behind anything. Not the mask, not the past, not the fears. She could feel the shift inside herself. The old Ellie, the girl who had once been afraid to show her face, was finally gone. This Ellie, the woman in front of Ryan, had nothing to prove. She had already won the hardest battle, the one against herself. As the night wore on, Ellie and Ryan found a quiet corner of the ballroom. The music played softly in the background, and for a moment it felt like they were the only two people in the room. The conversations had faded into a dull hum, but Ellie was lost in her own thoughts. She had always imagined that the alumni ball would be a reminder of everything she had lost, a painful confrontation with the past. Instead, it had turned out to be a celebration of her strength, of her journey, and of her future. "Ryan, you..." "No," Ellie said, her voice soft as she turned to face him. "I didn't expect this. To be here, to be with you. I've spent so long trying to outrun my past, but tonight I feel like I finally made peace with it." Ryan nodded, his expression sincere. "I think tonight you showed everyone something they didn't expect. You showed them who you really are. And who you really are is someone incredible." Ellie smiled, the first genuine smile of the night, and for a moment it felt like everything had come full circle. The years of being overlooked, of being judged for something she couldn't control, all seemed to fade into the background. Tonight was about more than just showing up. It was about claiming her power, her identity, and her future. And then, without thinking, Ellie reached out and took Ryan's hand, a simple yet profound gesture. She didn't need words to convey how much this moment meant. She had finally taken off the mask, not just the physical one, but the emotional one she had worn for so long. As they stood together in the quiet corner of the ballroom, surrounded by the people from their past, Ellie knew one thing for certain. She was ready for whatever came next. She was no longer defined by the past, by the girl she'd once been, or by the people who had tried to hold her back. For the first time in years, Ellie felt free. Free to be herself, free to be seen. And with Ryan by her side, she felt like there was nothing she couldn't accomplish. As the final chords of the night's music played, Ellie and Ryan walked together into the future, a future they would face as equals, no longer bound by the mistakes of the past, but propelled forward by the strength they had found in each other. They didn't need the ballrooms, the applause, or the whispers. They only needed each other, and the quiet understanding that had bloomed between them over the course of this unforgettable evening. And as they left the ballroom, hand in hand, Ellie realized that she had finally found her place, not just in the world, but in her own skin. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't running from her past. She was walking forward, unmasked, and ready to embrace the woman she had become. The crisp air of San Francisco welcomed Ellie and Ryan as they stepped out of the grand ballroom. The night had unfolded in ways neither had expected, and as they walked down the marble steps of the hotel, the weight of the evening slowly began to settle in. For Ellie, there was a lightness in her step, a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. She had removed the mask, both the literal one and the emotional one she had worn for so long, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Ryan, walking beside her, couldn't help but admire the strength Ellie had shown. Her courage had not only transformed the way others saw her, but it had also made him rethink the way he had lived his life. He had spent so many years focusing on achievements, on building his empire, and he had forgotten the simple raw power of forgiveness and growth. Ellie had shown him that redemption didn't always have to come in grand gestures. It could come in quiet, personal moments of clarity. As they reached the car, Ryan opened the door for Ellie and she slid into the seat, the cool leather, a contrast to the warmth that had built up inside her over the course of the evening. She looked out the window at the sparkling city lights, feeling a profound sense of peace. "Do you ever wonder if we're the same people we were back then?" Ellie asked, her voice soft, almost reflective. Ryan took a moment before responding. "I think we're the same people, Ellie, but better. We've learned from our mistakes, our regrets, and now we know how to be real with ourselves. I wasn't a great person back then, and I can never undo that. But tonight I think I saw you for the first time. Not as the girl I ignored in high school, but as the amazing woman you've become." Ellie turned her head to look at him, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "It's funny, Ryan. For the longest time, I thought I was the one who needed to prove something. I thought if I could just show everyone that I was more than what they had seen, then maybe I would finally be enough. But tonight I realized something. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. Not to them, and not to myself. I am enough." Ryan's heart swelled with admiration. He had always respected Ellie's resilience, but hearing her say those words he himself had struggled to say for years, made him realize how far she had come and how much he had to learn. "I'm glad you're here, Ellie," Ryan said quietly. "I'm glad we're here together. I don't know what comes next, but I know that tonight we both took a step forward. For you, it was unmasking yourself in front of the world. For me, it was realizing that redemption doesn't come from what we do for others. It comes from what we do for ourselves. We have to be willing to face our own truths." Ellie nodded, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "I've spent so long hiding behind a mask. Tonight was the first time I let myself be truly seen, not just by you, but by everyone. It's liberating, really." The next few weeks passed in a blur for both Ellie and Ryan. Ellie's work at the hospital was as demanding as ever, but the weight that had once burdened her was now gone. Every day she felt herself growing into a more confident, capable version of herself. Someone who no longer needed to hide behind anything, not even her past. Ryan, meanwhile, had started to look at his own life in a new light. His business was thriving, but he felt a shift in his priorities. Ellie had shown him that true success wasn't measured by stock prices or company valuations. It was measured by how honest you were with yourself, how willing you were to confront your past, and how much you were willing to forgive. One afternoon, as Ryan was catching up on some work at his office, he received a call from Tom Martinez. Tom had been following the events of the alumni ball with interest and had sent him a text just after the event had ended. But now Tom wanted to talk. "Hey Ryan, how's everything going?" Tom's voice was tentative over the phone. "It's going well," Ryan responded, leaning back in his chair. "How about you?" Tom hesitated before continuing. I've been thinking a lot about the ball, about everything. And I wanted to tell you something. I know we didn't really talk much about it, but I owe Ellie a huge apology. I didn't do enough back then to stop the bullying. I just stood by and I let it happen. I want to make it right, but I'm not sure how." Ryan paused, surprised by Tom's honesty. He had always seen Tom as a man who hid behind his own walls, just like he had once done. But here was Tom acknowledging his past mistakes and wanting to make amends. "Tom, I think you're already on the right path. You've made the first step by recognizing your mistakes. Now it's about showing Ellie that you truly understand how your actions affected her. And I know she's not expecting anything from you, but your willingness to confront your past, that means more than you might think." Tom's voice was quiet but sincere. "I've been donating to her department for the last few years. I never wanted her to know, but I figured it was the only way I could help her. It wasn't enough, I know, but I think I owe her more than just money. I need to say it to her face." Ryan smiled softly, understanding what Tom meant. "I think that's the right thing to do. But do it for her, not for you. Don't expect forgiveness, just be honest. She's stronger than anyone gives her credit for, and I think you'll find that when you approach her, you'll both be surprised by what happens." A few days later, Tom met Ellie for coffee at a small cafe in the heart of the city. It was a neutral space, a place where neither of them had to revisit the painful past they both carried. Tom sat down across from her, his hands trembling slightly as he looked at her. "Ellie, I've been carrying this guilt for a long time. I want to apologize. I didn't do enough to stop what happened back then. I was one of the ones who stood by, and I let it happen. You didn't deserve that. I know I can't change the past, but I need you to know that I'm truly sorry." Ellie's eyes softened as she listened to him. It wasn't easy for her to hear these words, but part of her understood that healing wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about confronting the past, about accepting the apology, and then deciding what to do with it. "I appreciate your apology, Tom," she said, her voice steady. "But you're right. You can't change what happened, and I don't expect you to. But I've already forgiven you. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean that what happened wasn't wrong. It just means that I'm no longer letting it control me, and I think that's the most important part." Tom nodded, his expression one of relief and understanding. "I'm glad to hear that. I didn't expect you to forgive me just like that. I just needed to say it. And I needed to stop hiding behind my own guilt." Ellie smiled softly. "We all have things we're hiding from, but sometimes facing them head-on is the only way to move forward." A few weeks after their conversation, Ellie and Ryan found themselves sitting in a quiet cafe, a comfortable silence between them as they enjoyed their coffee. Ellie had just finished her rounds at the hospital and Ryan had come by to check in. Their relationship had deepened over the past few months. Not just a romantic connection, but a true partnership, one built on mutual respect, honesty, and the shared journey of personal growth. "So," Ryan said, breaking the silence, "what's next for you? More surgeries? More breakthroughs?" Ellie looked at him, a smile tugging at her lips. "Well, I've been thinking. I've built this career on helping kids who've been through what I went through, but maybe it's time to step back a little. I've given so much of myself to my work, but I think it's time to start giving more to the people who matter most. And that includes you," Ryan smiled, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I'm ready, Ellie. Whatever comes next, we face it together." And for the first time in years, Ellie felt ready for whatever the future held. There were no more masks to hide behind, no more unfinished apologies or unresolved regrets. There was only the present where she was free to be who she truly was. And that, Ellie realized, was enough. The journey of Ellie and Ryan teaches us that true growth comes from embracing our past, not running from it. Their story is a powerful reminder that healing begins when we face our deepest fears and vulnerabilities. Ellie's courage to remove her mask, both physically and emotionally, symbolizes the strength it takes to accept ourselves as we are, imperfections and all. It's about forgiving not only others but also ourselves and letting go of the burdens that hold us back. Ryan's transformation shows that redemption is not a grand act, but a quiet commitment to making things right, one step at a time. This story inspires us to be kinder to ourselves, to seek reconciliation, and to never underestimate the power of personal growth. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support motivates us to create more content that touches hearts and challenges minds. Stay tuned for more captivating stories coming your way.